Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm Allison. I'm the head of product marketing at Pocket Health. And when I was thinking about what to present on today, I was thinking about all the questions that I've gotten about my career, the decisions I've made. Should the notes be up on the, okay, you're on it. All the decisions I've made about the types of jobs that I've had, my career trajectory, and specifically what product marketing looks like at an early stage startup. And so that's really what I'll be presenting on today. Just what are those opportunities but trade-offs that come with working for that profile of company. So first I'll be going briefly into the importance of place and the importance that it's played on my own career journey. And then unpacking, what that early stage startup opportunity has looked like for me. I know many of you are also working at startups, and so I'd love to chat more in the happy hour as well as answer any questions that you might have. And then lastly, leave you with some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, not just if you're working for an early stage startup or a scale up, but also if you're building the product marketing function at an org or just looking to refresh the brand internally. So I came across Richard Florida's book, Who's Your City, in 2014. And it was at a time in my life where I was kind of at a crossroads, both in terms of where I was living geographically and where I was in my career. And the main tenet of his book, and I'll just caveat, this was pre-pandemic, so pre the massive shift to remote working. But the main tenet of his book is that where you choose to live has enormous impact on your personal and professional life. So you may move somewhere for economic opportunities, but in doing so, sacrifice being near your friends and family. Or maybe you move somewhere to be closer to loved ones, but in doing so, you have fewer job opportunities. And this really resonated with me. I think the importance of place was something I had intrinsically felt. I was born in Kingston. I'd moved to Vancouver. At the time, I was living in Glasgow in Scotland. But it wasn't necessarily something I was deliberately conscious about. And it was something that really stuck with me as I thought about the types of companies that I wanted to work for as I considered my next career change. So at the time, I was at the University of Glasgow in Scotland, where I was a professor of film and television studies. It was a career track that I'd worked for many years, and I was investigating the relationship between media texts, their audiences, and teaching at the university. Over time, I'd kind of realized that it wasn't really fulfilling what I was looking for in a role. It wasn't necessarily an industry that embraced a lot of innovation and disruption. The organizational structure didn't facilitate a lot of cross-discipline collaboration. And I felt like I was kind of doing the same thing year over year, researching the same types of things, publishing the same types of things, teaching the same types of things. So with that, I made a pivot both in geography and career and moved back to Canada into a marketing strategy role at Canadian Tire Corporation. So at the time, I believe the corporate offices had about 30,000 people, so quite massive, and a very established marketing function, no surprises there, about 300 strong. But my role was a newly created role, and the main goal was to look at all the family of companies under the Canadian Tire umbrella and figure out how to create more holistic, customer-centric promotional planning processes across them. So what this looked like was working really closely with a bunch of different teams at these different companies and really planning out specific marketing promotions at specific moments for specific segments of buyers with specific buying triggers. So a lot of product marketing pieces there. I went on parental leave with my first daughter, and at that time, I think if anyone here has taken some time away from work, you can really use that time to kind of reflect on where you are and where you want to be. And during that time, I realized that I was really looking for a bit more of a new challenge. I moved to Top Hat, a Toronto-based scale-up. I'm just curious, has anyone here used Top Hat before or knows of it? Oh, okay. more no than I've used. And so when I joined, it had about 400 employees. So I moved from 30,000 to 400. And the marketing function was established, about 20 in the marketing team. And they had a very established go-to-market motion. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Top Hat, it is a teaching platform that at that time was predominantly used in classrooms, college and university classrooms in person. And so what happened a few weeks after I joined, the pandemic hit, and all the universities and colleges went remote. And so it became a really interesting moment in the company's history because suddenly we had to create entirely new messaging and positioning around how to use us remotely. We had new competitors. We had to build a whole new product roadmap. I know an earlier session talked about, having to throw out a lot of the work pre-pandemic as we address new challenges. And so there was this complete pivot of the company, of the product, and product marketing was really at the forefront of that. I went on parental leave again, and it seems like I'm reflexive in my leaves, and again was thinking about where I wanted to be and what I was looking for. And I moved to where I am today, which is Pocket Health, an early stage healthcare tech startup here in Toronto. So when I joined, it had fewer than 50 employees. I was marketing employee number 2, and I was brought in to build the product marketing function. And so there was an opportunity to not just build product marketing from the ground up, but build marketing from the ground up, develop that brand internally, but also show just what value we can provide in terms of full business results. And so overall, looking at this trajectory, it's a real movement from like a 30,000 person company to a 50, although we've grown since 50. This common theme of disruption, of working for very mission-driven companies, and also opportunities that have allowed me to be at the forefront of connecting the dots and being inherently collaborative. So you're probably wondering, okay, well, thanks for that, but that's not that interesting. But one of the things that I've really noticed in this movement is, one of the biggest trade-offs. So thinking back to Richard Florida's claim that there's a trade-off as you think about where you want to live or think about where you want to work. And for me, what I've seen is this trade-off around having resources and the potential for individual impact. So in this movement from the land of plenty that some of these big company budgets have, you have a movement from that, to a land of resource scarcity. And in that movement, the role of the individual becomes more pronounced. You have fewer resources at your disposal, and so there's this heightened need to prove value and to prove impact. But on the other hand, when you have these flatter hierarchies, you have broadened responsibilities, the opportunity to shine in those settings as an individual becomes more pronounced. And so I'll just take a moment to unpack what some of these trade-offs can look like, but also to tell you some of the questions that I've asked myself as I've gone through the process of thinking, where do I want to work? So first of all, from an organization perspective, are you someone who thrives working in ambiguity, building out of nothing? Or if you're working for a scale-up, really focused on potentially pivoting or having to redo work? Versus something that's more predictable, not necessarily comping year over year, but more predictable processes. Tied to that is around flexibility and structure. We were just talking, a couple of us during the lunch break, around one of the core skills of a product marketer is having resilience, being able to bounce back when things, don't always go right, don't always go your way. And that is even more pronounced within that early stage startup space. Lastly, a lot of companies are customer obsessed, but really at the early stage startup, you live and die by the customer. You need them to use your product, engage in your product, and it really infiltrates in everything you do. Culture. So again, no surprises here for many of you, I'm sure, but there is this really strong growth culture within these early stage startups. And is this a culture that you thrive in? For some, yes. For others, no. And tied to that is a focus on risk-taking innovation. I remember when I left Canadian Tire and would just take on projects at Top Hat, be like, well, who needs to approve these? Like, just run with it, we'll figure it out. And it was really, really fulfilling. You feel like you have a lot more autonomy, and also that psychological safety to take a few more risks. And then lastly, around work-life balance. So, there's that heightened aspect of the individual, and tied into that is, a stronger focus potentially on work across the entire spectrum of your daily life. So individual impact, I've already talked about this, but from a product marketing standpoint, we already wear multiple hats. This becomes even more pronounced in this setting, and I'll show you a little glimpse into what product marketing looks like at Pocket Health and some of the opportunities that have come from working at this profile of company. And tied to that, flat hierarchy. So the story I just told about, don't need approval, just do it. That's something that's really resonated with me. It's something that I've really embraced. And I do think as a product marketer, that can provide you a ton of empowering autonomy to be able to speak to different people across the org without feeling constrained or restricted by what are these exact reporting lines that I should be reaching out to. And lastly, accelerated potential career growth. And then this is just broader. It's tied to the potential of a company. But when you join an early stage startup, you also are able to inform a lot of the nascent functions. So for instance, Pocket Health didn't have an HR function when I joined. That was created, after I started there. The downside, the trade-off potentially is around benefits or what you might get at a larger company. And importance of equity. So again, thinking about if this is the right space for you to play, what role does equity play in your financial planning personally in your daily life? Is this something that appeals to you? And lastly, I feel like I've touched on this already, but again, working for a startup, a scale-up versus like a large corporation like Canadian Tire just comes with some added risk. And so thinking about that as you're making your decision. But ultimately, what excites me as a product marketer, and the way that I've summarized this in 3 big buckets, are the real big opportunities in my mind. And I'd love to hear from some of you in the happy hour if there's others that come to mind. But first, really being able not just to inform go-to-market strategy, but drive go-to-market strategy. As a product marketer at a startup, you really get a strong grasp on the market, on the customers, and being able to share that internally, being able to drive the motion forward through that understanding can be incredibly impactful, incredibly empowering. Tied to that is enablement. So I'll touch on this shortly, but playing a really active major role in educating and training customer-facing teams based on the nuanced understanding that you have, as well as your core product marketing skills around messaging, positioning, competitive intel. And lastly, within these early stage profiles, there's a really strong opportunity to play a role, not just in the go-to-market strategy, but the company vision as a whole. So how can you help inform that go-forward motion? What does that company roadmap look like? And how can product marketing be a key lever within that? In fundraising efforts, how can product marketing storytelling skills be leveraged to really drive impact? So these are the 3 exciting buckets that, or 3 buckets that got me really excited, and I'd love to hear if you have any more. Now I'll just quickly spotlight what is Pocket Health. Does anyone know what Pocket Health is? Okay, one in the back, great. So if you've had medical imaging done before, a broken bone, a pregnancy ultrasound, an MRI, you may already know that the dominant way for medical imaging to be shared in North America is via a CD. So you get a CD from your technician after the appointment and you take it to your family doctor, or that technician sends it directly to your family doctor, so you're bypassed altogether. And so in a nutshell, what Pocket Health is an online platform that gives patients the access online to their medical imaging and reports. So they can access it, download it, share it forever. They permanently own it. And so oftentimes, if you're experiencing a medical event, you can feel really in the dark. You can feel kind of out of the loop. And so this access becomes a way for you to feel more informed, more educated, more in the loop. And so Pocket Health was established in 2016. As Jason mentioned, we just went through a Series A funding round, and it was founded by two Toronto-based brothers, Rishi and Harsh Nair. We've been really lucky hearing all the layoff stories in the news and knowing people that have been personally impacted. We are still growing. So we've grown by 60% in terms of our employee base since January. So the 50 small company that I joined just over a year ago has grown quite a bit. We've grown from 2 marketing employees at that time to almost 20, which is really exciting. And we've grown as a company. So in line with the previous session, we're expanding into the US currently, but we are at 600 hospitals and imaging clinics across North America and 90% of hospitals and imaging clinics in Ontario alone. Now, what does product marketing at Pocket Health look like? So I just wanted to give you a glimpse to show you, we talked about the startup opportunity, but how that comes to life in terms of, what my team does at this startup. So, again, not groundbreaking from a product marketing perspective, we really own that strong customer understanding. So really understanding the market, our competitors, our customers in really nuanced ways. We launched and are managing our 2 customer advocacy programs. So we have one for patients and one for healthcare providers. And I think the power of product marketing really owning these is that we are by nature like connect the daughters. And so we're often sharing these insights across the org or connecting people in product, people in customer success with our advocates. And then working on our messaging and positioning. So really thinking about, as we're going into new markets as well, how do we work really closely with the sales team to understand what's resonating, what's not, especially since marketing is only a year old at Pocket Health. Product adoption and engagement, again, not groundbreaking from a product marketing lens. We work really closely with our product and engineering teams. What does our product roadmap look like? How do we facilitate beta testing, user testing, and make sure that we're getting those insights back so we can become a really important flywheel within the org? We created and now manage our product launch processes. So those didn't exist prior to product marketing. And then we work really closely with marketing across a series of initiatives. But members of my team are leading demand gen efforts, event efforts. It's really broadening what traditional product marketers may look like at other orgs. And then lastly, maybe a slightly more atypically, sales enablement rolls up to product marketing at Pocket Health. So we manage the sales onboarding, training, and professional development across our business development teams and enterprise. And then we work really closely with our customer success team. So these are like account managers, implementation specialists on really high priority initiatives like quarterly business reviews. And so what this means is, again, that idea of an insights flywheel is we consistently have a ton of on-the-ground insights that we're feeding back to the marketing team, we're feeding back to other teams. And so I wanted to end by kind of giving you some of the tips and tricks that have been really helpful for me. I'd love to learn from all of you as well. But first of all, if you are considering the move to a different company, if you are considering the move to the startup space, just make sure you're doing your homework. So researching who's on the leadership team. Are these people that are going to value marketing? Are they going to value product marketing? Is it a product that you truly believe in? As I said previously, these companies live and die by the customer, and you as a product marketer really need to believe in the meaningful impact and growth that that product can have. What's happening in the industry, and is this company poised to capitalize on those? And I would just say, explicitly ask these questions as you're meeting people at the organization. It's something that I do whenever I'm considering moving to a new company, just being really open and getting the answers. When you're starting, going on a product marketing roadshow, how many people in the room have been asked, what is product marketing by someone internally? Yeah. And so if you're building, that function for the first time, go around, meet all the different teams, tell them what product marketing is, and figure out how you can help them. That'll make it way easier for you down the line to be able to be brought in proactively to initiatives, to be able to broaden the impact of what product marketing can do. Forgot I had an animation. Become the insight flywheel. So we're already this. I feel like product marketers are just inherently this flywheel. But making sure when you start that you carve out that time to become really informed on the market, that you take time to understand the buyer, you listen to calls, you understand the pain points, the challenges, you do your research and interviews. And most importantly, you establish processes to share this across the company. Having these insights live within product marketing is not useful for the organization as a whole, but it's not useful for you as a function who's also trying to build their brand internally, who's also trying to inform bigger initiatives happening across the company. I think as part of this, really thinking about when you start at an organization, how can you kind of sit back and soak in what's happening internally to understand where product marketing will fit in. It's funny, I've been asked at 2 companies that I've worked at before why I was so quiet during the first few weeks of starting. And it was literally just listening to how people talk, the terms they use. I think Canadian Tire had these very complicated flyer numbered acronyms that I was like, I need to learn these so people respect when I speak up in a meeting. But actually listening and learning the way that an organization talks and mirroring that as a product marketer can become incredibly powerful when you're trying to get buy-in. Play to your and your team's strengths. I'm a big believer in not subscribing people to very rigid roles, but allowing them to collaborate more freely and play to their strengths. So I said previously, some of my team members will lead initiatives that aren't typically product marketing initiatives, but where they provide a ton of value and where we actually are able to connect the dot actually with a lot of things happening within product marketing. And I think really taking this approach, you can almost think of product marketing as this octopus within the org. You're kind of trying to wrap your tentacles around a lot of things, be involved, but also have that door opened for you. So you're not the one kicking down the door saying, let me in, I'm product marketing, I can help you, but rather that they're asking you to be involved. And then lastly, this is something that I've grown really comfortable with, but leaning into that discomfort of stretching. If you're doing something for the first time, especially if you're at a new early stage startup in a new industry, oftentimes things will feel uncomfortable or unsure. It's hard, and that's why there's that feel of stretching. But it's in those moments that I personally have found the greatest growth, that I've personally found, some of my biggest wins is just kind of leaning into that stretching motion and trying something new. So thank you so much, and I'd love to answer any questions.
Thanks, Allison. That was great. Brandon, if you could toss up the Slido. Anyone in the audience has a quick question they want to stand up and ask? Go ahead, sir.
I've got a question that I probably want to ask every presenter today, but what have you found is a good strategy when presenting new market opportunities that don't have necessarily the typical data of, well, we have this many customers in this industry already, whereas with the notion that, well, the reason we don't is we haven't unlocked that market, right? Like the previous presenter was talking about, if you don't have the right regulations and the right prereqs to go after a market. So what I'm kind of getting at is how do you convince sales and leadership of something that, there's a bit of an unknown, but the only reason that it's there is because you haven't unlocked it yet. You haven't actually, the market won't let you in unless you do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, probably the academic side of me is I always lean on research, and it depends, like that term research can be so nebulous, but there can be so much. We actually just did a project a couple of months ago now, looking at where in the United States we should try and enter, where have we already entered, but where we should play more strongly. And as you brought in that idea of research, there was a ton of inputs that we were looking at. So everything from, what are we hearing in the news? What are our reps hearing our big competitors in those spaces, and which competitors can we win more easily against? What kind of legislation is happening in those regions that might make it easy, or on the flip side for healthcare, what actually might facilitate? There's a lot of legislation around giving patients more access, and so that becomes a way to kind of lean into that, and it's maybe an open door. Looking at historical win rates, looking at historical closed lost, trying to make those inferences and testing it out as well. But I always feel like coming from that research first place, even just amassing all of that together and then looking at it and trying to figure out the go forward plan has been most effective. I hope that answers your question.
It's a great question. Time for a couple more. So when a product marketing is a new function, a majority of the time is focused on filling the gap. How do you carve out resources to establish processes to scale the product marketing function?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say we're in the process of doing that now. I think it's carving out resources, but also becoming comfortable with leverage and building trust. I think as a product marketer, you kind of want your hands in everything. I just gave the analogy about the octopus. But also when you've built it all from the first time, it can be really hard to kind of then hand things off to other functions as they've grown up and become more of a consultant in some of those cases where it becomes not as value add for product marketing to lead. And so I think part of it is becoming comfortable, trusting those that you're working with. Part of it is, proving to the company the value that product marketing can provide, so they allocate you more hiring resources. That's more a hiring piece. And then just making sure you have the processes in place, the mechanisms, so that you're still kept in the loop. Again, facilitating more that consultancy role where it becomes more valuable.
That's great. Allison, thanks so much. Everyone, give it up for Allison.